Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. I know that you're all really busy, so we really appreciate you taking the time in the evening to come and join us. So today, like Michelle said, I'm going to be talking about the importance of speech and language development and early literacy. And I really want to talk about it in the context of what you can do as parents or as early educators to really set our kids up for success. We'll talk about speech sound development, language development, and really how that relates to literacy development. And I would love for you to come away today with some ideas of what you can be doing at home or at daycare with your kids to help build these skills. So really the focus hopefully today is what can we be doing and what should we be doing? I know especially with early literacy, as parents, we're not always sure if we need to be doing extra stuff at home, and if we are, then what should we be doing? I know I actually felt the same way. So I think it's helpful to talk about a few things that we can be doing that would make a big difference. I'll start with speech sound delays. Why intervene? So I often have parents ask me why we need to do speech therapy, why their kids need to enroll, and if they might just grow out of the speech sound errors by themselves. So there's two big reasons that we do intervene if a child has a speech sound delay. The first one is intelligibility, and the second one is early literacy. So intelligibility, if a child has low intelligibility, which means that they are difficult to understand, that is really going to impact their ability to communicate. It's going to affect how they build friendships, how they participate in the classroom, how they participate in conversations, really how they express their needs. And this can so easily and so quickly result in frustration for them and also can really affect their self-esteem. So we also often see challenging behaviors come out of that because it's just so frustrating for them to not be able to be understood. So our goal by intervening early is to really increase their intelligibility so that they can express their wants and needs. They can communicate in all the environments they're in. They can have fun, play with their friends, talk to their teachers. It's important for their confidence, and it's also important for just their quality of life. It's so dependent on being understood. Um, the next one is early literacy. Research shows us, like we know that kids who have speech sound delays are at a higher risk of having difficulty when it comes to early literacy skills and then beyond that into reading and writing skills. So that is going to impact them. If that happens, that impacts them in early elementary school and will then follow them through their schooling. So we want to make sure we intervene with speech sound delays early on so that we can get ahead of that. And so it's not going to impact them going into elementary school. So in terms of intelligibility, this is what we would want a parent to be able to understand from their child. So up until their child is 2, you would hopefully be able to understand about up to 50% of what they're saying. Between the ages of 2 and 3, you can understand between 50% and 75% of what they're saying. Between the ages of 4 and 5, it's between 75 to 90%. And then after 5, you basically understand everything they're saying. There is some new recent research to show us that shows us that it's actually it's a lot more variable and it takes a lot longer for strangers to be able to understand kids. So if it's an unfamiliar listener who does not have any context, they will likely have a hard time understanding your preschooler, even if you can understand 100% of what they're saying. So I did want to bring that up because if that's happening and you're finding that like, oh, we understand everything he says, but then when my friends come over, they don't really understand what he's saying, that to a certain degree, that is normal and it's to be expected. But you know your child best, you have the context of what they're saying. So if you feel that you're not reaching these numbers, especially the one on the right, that is probably when it's time to be seeing an SLP. So speech sound development. There's lots of different charts out there and illustrations that show. Oh, I'll just let these people in to the waiting room. Sorry, one second. Okay. There's lots of different charts that give the same information, but this one basically just says these are the ages that we expect all of these sounds to be mastered. 90 to 90% of kids have mastered these sounds at these ages. So by the time a child turns 2, they usually have the P, B, D, M, N, H, and W sound. By the time they turn 3, that's when they're getting the K and the T sound, the Y, G, and ng. sound. And then when they're four, we get the F, Z, V, S, SH, CH, like the ch sound, the sh sound, the j sound, and the L sound, L sound. And it's not until kids are five that most of them have mastered the R sound and that voiced TH, which you hear in words like that and this. So, and then not until they're six that you hear the voiceless TH, which is in words like think and thumb. So I wanted to bring that up because I know a lot of parents are or can might have like a 3-year old and be worried if your child's not saying the R sound yet. Um, but that is not necessarily a concern at this point. That's not to say that all kids develop sounds in this order, and it's definitely not the case at all. Kids develop them in all different orders. They may have one of those harder sounds like the S sound before they have the K sound, or it might come in a different order from this. And it's also not the case that if you are working with an SLP, that they're going to work on it, these sounds in this order. There's quite a few factors that factor into which sound your SLP will work on first and what order they will choose. The first thing that they look at, and we talked about intelligibility already, but the first thing they look at is which sound is impacting their intelligibility the most. So if they are having a hard time being understood, we want to start with the sound that's going to kind of give us the biggest bang for our buck, that's going to make the biggest difference to their intelligibility. We also look at which patterns are atypical. So when kids are learning how to talk, there are developmental patterns that they often or typically go through, and these are called phonological patterns. So these are phonological processes. So these are just a way to simplify speech for kids until they're able to say the more complicated sounds. So a really common one you may have seen in your kids is called cluster reduction. So instead of saying spoon, they would say poon. So this is such a common developmental process that it may not be one of our main targets. However, if they were doing something atypical that we wouldn't expect them to be doing at that age, we would start with that. So an example of that would be something called initial consonant deletion, like if they were saying og instead of dog and they were taking away that first sound. So we always will start with the atypical patterns. And then once those have been resolved, we can move on to the typical patterns and help children move past those more quickly. Stimulability is also something we consider. So if your child is not able to say a sound in their conversational speech, but then when you say to them, okay, can you say it like this? Like, for example, if they're not able to say the L sound in their conversational speech, but then when you say to them, okay, say lunch, and they can do it correctly, or if you hear it sometimes in their speech, but not consistently, those are both signs that the child is, or that the sound is emerging by itself. So that would probably be a sound that your SLP would not choose to target first, because it's likely that it will continue to develop on its own. And then the other thing that we think about is generalizability patterns. So we know, and there's research to show that if we target certain sounds, they will indirectly improve other sounds. So if we pick the sound at the top, hopefully it will branch off and improve other sounds as well. So all of those are things your SLP will be thinking about. If you are interested to hear sort of like the reasoning behind why your SLP is taking this sequence or approach that she is with your child, that would be a great conversation to have with them so that you can understand the thinking behind it. So just make sure that okay. So in terms of what can you do to help your child with their speech sound development, really the first step is to just draw attention to that sound in all of your daily activities without expecting them to say it back. So the first step is to just draw attention. So you could do this by, if they ask you like, can we have lunch now? You could say to them, yeah, let's have lunch. So it's very indirect, but you are sort of exaggerating that first ul sound in lunch, just to draw attention to the sound so that they can hear it very clearly. And it may just spontaneously trigger them to change the way they're saying that sound. You could be a little bit more direct about it as well. You could say, I heard lunch. Let's try putting our L sound in it like this, lunch, and see if they can say it back to you. And then you're going to be very positive whether they can or can't. You'll say, oh, that was good trying, lunch. And you can just say it to them again and then give them their lunch. You don't need to keep on going, forcing them to say it. that would be a way to really discourage them from doing it. So just like every now and again, see if you can get it. If you can't, be positive and move on. Another thing you could do, you could just bombard them with that sound. So when we sing songs, we often, like if you were going to sing happy birthday, you could sing it with la la la, like la 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 la. So you could really do that with any sound that they're working on. If they're working on the ka sound, you could pick a tune that they know and like and sing it with the ka sound, like ka 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 ka, and kind of point to the area that you think you're using to make that sound. So really, it's all about just drawing their attention, making them aware of that sound. So you want to just model it consistently and clearly in daily activities. If you can get down to their level so they can see your mouth, that's great. And then if they are successful, make sure you praise them for it and say like, wow, that is such a tricky sound. And you just said it so well. I'm so excited about that. Just so that they feel proud of themselves and they want to do it again. Um, if we notice it, then they'll be a lot more excited to keep trying. So, moving on to language development, kids are learning a huge amount of language in the first 5 years of their lives, and language skills are highly variable between different kids. So, one 3-year-old may be extremely different from another 3-year-old in their class at this point, and that is not to say that one of them is delayed or one of them is advanced. Um, a child's language is really built on based on like all of their experiences, what exposures they've had. So it's going to be so different across the board, but it is important to remember throughout this whole presentation that a child's language skills are the foundation for the later reading and writing abilities. So that is why as SLPs, our focus is on building strong language skills first before we start with literacy. Literacy is so important as well, though. So if we can embed phonemic awareness into activities wherever we can, that's great too. But we want to make sure that language skills are strong so that children have that foundation that they can build their literacy skills on. So we're going to go through milestones a little bit here, but I mean, it could take an hour just to go through all of the different milestones for each age. So I just kind of have a snapshot for you of what we'd expect from a 4-year-old, because I feel like a lot of our kids are 4, or they're going to be 4, um, or they maybe just turned 5. But it is really helpful to go through milestones in this checklist form because if if there's something that they are not already doing at this age, you can kind of make a mental note that that's something they should be doing, and you can start modeling it in your own language, in your own speech to them. So I'll give you an example of that in a second. But I also wanted to say I took these milestones from the CDC website, and I would really encourage you to check it out as well. I have a link on the last slide of this, but after every single milestone that they give, they also have a video, like a link to a video of a child that age doing the skill. So it's pretty helpful just to give you an idea of what that looks like in real life. Um, so I would check it out if you're interested in the milestones for your child's age. So a 4-year-old should be able to say a complete sentence with 4 or more words. They're able to join in on familiar songs, stories, or nursery rhymes, like not necessarily say it all perfectly, but the familiar parts they remember the words to. They talk about at least one thing that happened during the day. They answer simple questions like what is a coat for? What can we do with a crayon? So we call that object function. They can tell you what is next in a familiar story. So if there's a story they've read 100 times, you don't necessarily need to turn the page. They know what's going to happen on the next page. They use spatial concepts correctly. So these are the prepositions like behind, next to, in front, beside. They're starting to use irregular past tense, like he ran, they fell down, instead of runned or falled. They can describe how to do things. They can list items that belong in a category. So, like, you could say, what are some types of vehicles, or tell me some types of clothes. You can give them the category name and they can think of items that go into it. And they are starting to be able to answer why questions. So, that again is taken from the CDC website and the Stanford Medicine Children's Health. So, what can you do at home or in the classroom to build language? Again, like I said before, if there is a skill that your child doesn't have, sorry, I'm just checking the waiting room. Okay. If there's a child or if there's something on that list that your child is not able to do, the best way that they will learn to do it is if you model it for them. So to give you an example, a milestone for a 3-year-old is that they're able to describe the action that is happening in a picture using ing verb endings. So they're not just saying like run or cry. They're able to say like, oh, she's running, he's crying. And if they're unable to do this, you can model it for them repeatedly in their books, in everyday things that you're seeing without expecting them to say it. So if you provide those models, they will pick it up without you saying like, now you say it, now you say it. Another example of this would be for a 3-year-old, we expect them to be able to express ideas and feelings rather than just talking about the world around them. So if I wanted my son to start expressing his feelings and ideas, I need to start modeling that in my own language. So I might say to him, I'm really disappointed that we didn't make it to the library today before it closed. I really wanted to return all our overdue books. Maybe we can go this weekend instead. So um, you can see I'm sharing my feelings. I'm feeling really disappointed. Then I'm sharing an idea. Maybe we could go this weekend. That would be a solution. Another example would just be to say, like, I'm feeling so, oh, I'll just let this person in. Sorry. Another example would be to say, like, um, I'm feeling so tired. I really don't have enough energy right now to take the dog for a walk, but I know that she needs it because she's been in the house all day. Okay, when I get home, I think I'm going to make a hot chocolate to warm up. So this type of thing is often something we would not say to our 3-year-old because we kind of are having these internal dialogues that really they don't affect the 3-year-old, but it is important for them to hear it because that is the type of process that we want to hear from them. We want to hear that language. We want to hear about their feelings and for them to be able to work through those feelings, come up with some ideas, make a plan. All of those skills are skills that we want our kids to have. So you can see in both examples, I share feelings and then I share ideas or solutions that come from those feelings. It's also good to normalize, like we all have these feelings. Sometimes I feel really tired and I don't want to do what I have to do. And I can be sad about it, just like you would be sad about something too. Um, so the next things on our list of what you can do to build language, I have Visit Books Share Time website. So I have a link for this at the end again on the last slide. This is a website created by an SLP, and it's really great because it has a search bar at the top, and you can put in any word. Any keyword. For example, if you are reading your child's IPP and one of the goals is that they need to work on pronouns or they need to work on past tense verbs, you can type that into the search bar and it will give you a list of really great books that you can use to target those skills. You can also type in sounds, like if you know your child is working on the K sound, you can put K sound in the keywords and it will give you a ton of books that are really good to work on the K sound. And it also does social and emotional concepts. So you can type in feelings or sharing or kicking or whatever you are going through. So it's a really good resource to help you find relevant books to target all of those areas. And I'm going to talk a lot more in this presentation about why we need to read books and why we need to prioritize conversation with our kids. But those are the next two. So we'll go into detail about both of those last 2 points. So we've talked about speech sound development and language development. Now we're going to move on to literacy development, specifically focusing on what we should be doing with our preschoolers to help build their literacy skills. So to start, there are a lot of myths or misconceptions out there about how kids learn to read. So at one time, there was a strong movement called the whole language approach, which basically says that if we provide our children with a language-rich environment and immerse them in books and read to them all the time, they will just learn to read naturally. But we absolutely know this is not the case. And it's been very debunked now. When you search it, it will literally say the first thing that comes up is like, this is disproven. Our brains are not naturally wired for reading. It is tricky for us. It needs explicit instruction and it needs tons and tons of practice. And we need to build this skill in our brains by making a new circuit. And that circuit goes on top of our existing language skills. So we build our language skills first when kids are young, before they've been exposed or introduced to literacy. And then those reading skills basically sit right on top of our language abilities, which is why we start with language and then we introduce literacy afterwards. So it is a myth that it develops naturally. It will just come naturally if they read lots of books. It does not just click for them. And we don't have a specific area in the brain that is responsible solely for reading. So having said that, um, this slide is called the Big Five. So these are five important abilities that children need in order to become proficient readers and writers. So this was in 1997. There was a big project taken on in the States by a panel of educators and researchers. It was called the National Reading Panel. So they went through all of the existing research and evidence so that they could come up with the best practice of how to teach kids to read. And the findings came out in a report from the National Institute of Child Health. So it outlines these five areas that we need to be working on in order for our kids to become proficient readers. So I'll start by talking about the top three, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. Those are also key parts of our language skills you will probably recognize. So in order to have strong language skills without even thinking about reading and writing, we need to build vocabulary, work on fluency, build comprehension in our kids. So these are things you can do out and about. You can do it in the car, you can do it while you're making dinner, you can do it when you're reading books, you can do it in the grocery store. Um, the last two, phonemic awareness and phonics, may require you to start doing some things that you're not already doing at home. And I put a star beside phonemic awareness because for the age group that we're talking about, for preschoolers, phonemic awareness is extremely important. This is kind of like the level that they're at, and this is where we should be focusing our attention. If we are going to be able to help them, this is the area we need to work on. Okay, so to start with vocabulary, this is definitely my favorite area. It's just so important. Vocabulary is such a precursor to strong reading skills, strong writing skills, but also so central to everything in our lives. All of our daily interactions, socially, personally, our interpersonal relationships, our professional relationships, our ability to learn. It is all so dependent on our vocabulary. So, um, we definitely want to make sure we are building a strong vocabulary in our preschoolers. Um, I wanted to start by giving you this example that I heard recently in a podcast because it just illustrates how important our input can be on our kids' vocabularies and how much they are able to learn on a daily basis through your everyday tasks. So, okay, I need to make sure I have my notes for this one because it's hard to remember. Okay, so there is a mom and her child in the grocery store. And the mom said, so there's three scenarios. The first scenario, the mom says to her child, okay, we're going to the grocery store. Keep your hands in the cart. Don't touch anything. I've got my list. Do not touch anything. So as they walk through the produce aisle, the child sees an avocado and they reach out for it. Like they really want to touch the avocado. And the mom says, no, hands in the cart. I told you, don't touch anything. Keep your hands in the cart. Put your hands on your lap. And then you keep walking. The second scenario is that the child does the same thing, reaches out for the avocado, and the mom says, yeah, that's an avocado. But remember, don't touch. Keep your hands in your cart. I don't want you to touch anything. So that was slightly better because at least the child heard that it was an avocado. So there's some vocabulary there for them. The third scenario is that the child reaches out for the avocado, and this is intense, but just bear with me. I know this may not be your go-to response, but the mom says, "Oh, yeah, that's an avocado." And the sign says it's an organic avocado. Do you know what organic means? It's when the farmer says that they don't use any pesticides to grow the food. A pesticide is something that kills the bugs that sometimes are eating our plants. But pesticides are chemicals, so they can be harmful for us to eat. And some people only like to buy organic food because they don't want to eat the chemicals. I wonder what we could make with avocados. We could make something called guacamole and dip our chips in it. So that's a really extreme example. Um, I I mean, I had to I had to write it down to remember how to even describe it to you guys. But the point is, you have just given your child so many vocabulary words. You've given them this whole concept about farming, how um, introduce all these new words to them, these new concepts. They are not going to come away from that experience being able to retell that to anyone else. But the important thing to remember is that words are learned from repetition and multiple exposures. So through that exposure, you have built a little bit more, and they've taken in a little bit more of of a little bit more of that whole everything you just said. And over time, they will understand what chemicals means and organic means and harmful and all that stuff. Um, Another example that would be more realistic, probably, would be that you could see the avocado and say, oh, yeah, this is an avocado. Oh, this one is really firm. When it's hard like this, that means it's not ready for us to eat. Here, you feel it. Yeah, see how it's really hard? So this one is not ripe. We can't eat this one yet. Let's see if there's a soft, squishy one. Let's see. This one's kind of soft, and you could feel them. So in that example, the child is getting so many different words. They're getting descriptive words like soft, squishy, hard, firm, ripe. They're also starting to understand the concept of like, okay, fruit or vegetables start off not ripe, and then over time they become more ripe, and then we can eat them when they are ready. So there's just a whole concept that they're learning. And the more, I think really it is astonishing how much kids will take in if you give them the opportunity. They are listening, especially at this age. They really are like sponges. So it may seem like, okay, that's probably over their heads, but like they will take information in. So my philosophy is just to give them whatever you can in terms of vocabulary and explaining concepts and explaining things around them, and they will absorb what they can. And that is going to benefit them. Um, so repetition and multiple exposures, like conversations like that taking the opportunities when they arise, is a great way to build vocabulary. Children's books are also critical for vocabulary development. And I know you've all heard this a lot, but parents who read one picture book to their child each day provide their children with exposure to an estimated 78,000 words each year. So over the 5 years before kindergarten, children from literacy-rich homes hear a cumulative 1.4 million more words than children who are never read to. So that is huge. Um, they're just there's already such a gap by the time they're 5 if we're not reading to them. So we need to be reading to them frequently before they're 5. Interestingly, though, books are great because they provide lots of new words, but they also provide rare words to our kids. Um, it's not just the number of words that are important, it's also hearing different words and specific words that have specific different meanings that's going to really expand their vocabulary. So I have a quote here that says, although the number of words children hear is important, the differences in quality and the nature of the conversation is what most affects language development. So this is by Jim Trellis, who wrote something called the Read Aloud Handbook. So I took this out of that handbook. In a conversation from an adult to a 6-month-old child, there would be 9.3 rare words for every 1,000 words they said. In a conversation with a 10-year-old, that conversation would have about 11.7 rare words out of every 1,000. An adult to an adult talking to each other there would be about 17.3 rare words. A TV show would have 22 rare words, and a children's book would have 30.9 rare words. So this is huge. Like a children's book is 3 times richer in rare vocabulary than a conversation that you would have with a 10-year-old. It's a lot more, it has a lot more rare words than a TV show, and almost double the rare words that you would have in a conversation between an adult with another adult. So it's like we can't compare it to anything. Reading is so important. It provides something that nothing really else does. There's nothing that can compare. It's so valuable. And another thing is that there's pictures that are still that they're able to reference, hearing it and looking at the picture as long as they need, making those connections of what the words mean. It's just really, really important. So this is how we build their vocabularies and set them up for not only academic success, but also interpersonal success with and for their relationships. So the next one of our big five is fluency. Um, Fluency means that a child is able to speak or read with appropriate speed, accuracy, prosody. Prosody, that's kind of like our intonation, our rate. Um, the important thing to remember with fluency is that it must be mastered orally first. We cannot expect someone to be a fluent reader if they're not able to be a fluent speaker when they're talking in a comfortable environment. And it is important to remember that fluency in our kids can be really, really impacted by a speech sound delay. So earlier I was saying one of the reasons we intervene with speech sound delays is because um, it can impact. Sorry, one of the reasons we intervene with speech sound delay is because it can impact literacy, and this is why. So if they don't have strong fluency because they have trouble speaking quickly and accurately because of their speech sound delay, this is going to impact fluency, which will then impact reading ability later on. So to build this skill, we can really work on fluency every day by having frequent conversations with our kids, talking to them as much as we can, telling them stories, reading books together, retelling stories together, talking to them or with them about their favorite TV shows, daily conversations about anything that interests them. And I think it's important to just to say, not just talking to them like, okay, I need you to clean up your toys. We're going to our play date next and giving them a list of what's happening. Um, but you're actually engaging in conversation with them. You want to hear about their preferences and what they liked or what they didn't like or how they felt. Just going into it as elaborately as you can. And also model storytelling for them. Like give them examples like when I was little, I used in this every summer I used to go blah 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 so that they can hear how a story is told and they will pick up on that. Like my son often says to me, because we say to him, like I say when I was a little girl, and then I'll tell him the story, and he'll often say, when I was a little boy, and then he'll go into something too. So that's a great way. If you tell them stories, they'll start telling you stories. So it's a simple concept. Like the more they talk, the more practice they will get. And the more you talk to them and with them, the more they're going to talk to you. So remember that we always want to model the language that we want to build in them. So you telling them stories, you showing them fluency, um, is how they are going to build their own fluency skills. So the next one of our big fives is comprehension. This is a really interesting one because we actually cannot teach comprehension. It needs to be built over time. And the way we build it is by giving our kids background knowledge and vocabulary. So this is really our opportunity to front load our kids with background knowledge and vocabulary. So if we think back to that grocery store example, the response about the avocados did provide new vocabulary to them, but it also, like that very extreme example I gave you, it taught them new vocabulary words like organic and harmful and pesticides and chemicals, but it also built up their background knowledge of how plants are grown, where our food comes from, just learning more about farming. So background knowledge really means explaining how things work to our kids, like when do certain things happen. So you can teach them about the seasons, about temperatures, about how melting and freezing works. Those are concepts, so that's background knowledge that they can then use later on when they're learning new concepts. Um, okay, so out of the big five, we've talked about vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. I'm going to talk about the last two now, which are phonemic awareness and phonics, which is kind of an area that we have to be more intentional about. Um, we can't really do it. We have to think about it. We have to do some things differently, probably. Oops. So the first one we'll talk about, and like I said, the main thing we should be focusing on for this age is phonemic awareness. That's really just drawing your child's attention to individual sounds. So a phonemic awareness means the ability to notice, think about, and work with individual sounds. At this point, it's all oral, it's all auditory. There's no letters involved yet. So the skills that a child needs to hear in order to be able to read and write are they need to be able to hear and identify the sounds. So what's the first sound you hear in cat? What's the last sound you hear in cat? How many sounds do you hear in cat? So being able to hear and and ah. The next skill they need to be able to do is to blend sounds together. This is a critical skill in order to be able to read later on. So they are going to see three letters together, h, ah, t, and their brains need to blend those letters together to give them the word that it means. Um, so if I give my child, if I say to them, okay, what word am I making here? Listen to what word I'm making. Ah, what word did I say? So you could try to play little games like that with them and see if they can do it. And if they can't, you model how you do it. So you could say ah Did you get it? Do you know what it is? Ah car, and make it more and more obvious as you go. And then eventually you can tell them car. I said car. So at the beginning, it's a lot with everything, we want to model it for them. If they can't do it yet themselves, we model it for them and we model the process that we're thinking in order for them to know how we're getting to that answer. So the next thing we want them to be able to do is segment sounds, and this is critical for being able to write. So when they want to write the word cat, they're going to have the word cat in their mind, and they need to now separate it into the different sounds and letters so that they can correctly spell it. So segmenting words would be like segmenting sounds. So it would be the opposite of the blending example. We would say car. Okay, what sounds do we hear in car? R. So we're breaking the word apart instead of putting it together. The top three that we have here are all different forms of manipulation. So that's how we're working with the sounds. They need to be able to add a sound in. So say we have the word car. What happens if we added t to the end of that? Then we have cart. What word do we make? Cart. Oh, a totally different word. And above that is deletion. So taking a sound away. So say we had the word cart and we took away the T. Now what word do we have? And then the most complex skill that they need to develop is substitution. So okay, how can I turn the word tap into map? Which sound do I need to change? Oh, I need to change the first sound. Um, so these are complex. I know that this maybe sounds overwhelming and maybe sounds like something you don't feel comfortable doing with your kids, but just knowing that these are the skills they need to have, this is what they need to be doing at daycare or at home or wherever they're doing it in order to become strong readers. And the last skill that we want them to have is rhyming. We'll talk about that at the end if we have time, which we're running out of. So, okay, phonics. So this is when the letter comes into play. This is when the child is able to match that sound that they can now identify with the written letter, what it looks like. So for us, what the first step to this is just exposing them to letters. Help them pair the letter with the sound it makes. So with my own son, we started with names that were meaningful to him. So for example, actually the very first thing that ever happened was I got this necklace that had an S on it, and immediately, because he's like a toddler, noticed it and asked me what this means. So that was my first opportunity. I said, "Oh, it's an S for Sam." And immediately that stuck with him, and every time he saw an S in letters, he would say S for Sam, S for Sam. And so that was a great opportunity to build on. So I'd say, yeah, like S makes the sound S that we have at the start of your name. Sam, Sam. So you're just drawing attention to it. You're just talking about it as much as you can. And then later on, when his sister Isla was born, I got an I. And again, he noticed that right away. So I said, yeah, that's an I, like the start. That's what Isla's name starts with, I. And then I again went deeper into it. Like I can also make the sound I, like we have an iguana or instrument. It can make two sounds. It can say I or it can say I. So even if they're not taking it all in every single time you say it, like keep providing that information for them and it will stick. Some of it will stick. The other thing you can do is use fridge letter magnets, those little bath foam things. You can just draw letters on pieces of paper and talk about them. And a really important one that I do have a slide on later if we do have time, but we might not, is pointing out environmental print. So this is really important too because it's the kind of the beginning of their understanding that that group of letters that I see on that sign has a meaning. So the letters represent a meaning. So it's a critical part of their literacy development is to understand that we can put different groups of letters together to convey to tell us what it is. Like, oh, that tells us it's Safeway because those letters are together. Um, so pointing out stop signs, their favorite store, logos, anything that they can recognize is really helpful for them at this age. So the goal for you is that they are able to identify the letter name and the sound that it makes. If they're having trouble with the letters, and this is, I would say, a lot for the day for teachers, one of the things we can make it, one of the ways we can make it easier for them is to make the letters more visually meaningful. So, for example, this W does not at all correspond, like W does not tell us it makes the sound wha. There's no connection there. So making it more meaningful, like W, the shape of a W is a worm. So you can think worm, W. It kind of clicks a little bit better. And there is research to show that embedding pictures into letters is a helpful way for kids to learn the letters. So that's always something you can try if you're noticing that your child is having a tricky time remembering which letter is which. So I do have a video here of me reading with my son, but I'll just quickly say, what can you do at home? The first thing that you need to do is read with them often. Involve them in it. So let them choose the books and then read those books. So when I recently took my son to Fair's Fair, the bookstore, and he picked this book, Meet Chase the Police Bot, which would not have been my choice, but he loves it and we read it all the time. So this is a perfect opportunity for me because he's highly motivated, he's engaged. So this is the book that I try to sneak in some phonemic awareness practice. Um, and I will just show you that video at the end of that. But the other thing you can do when you're reading any book is to talk about the book, build their fluency and comprehension skills, ask them questions, what's happening in the book, what do you think is going to happen next? Get them thinking about the storyline, basically. Drawing attention to any letters and sounds in the book and model the skills we want them to learn. So before you're ever going to ask them the question, you're going to show it to them. So, for example, with this book, Meet Chase the Police Bot, before I ever asked him any questions, I modeled everything when I was reading it. So I would say, okay, let's read this one. Meet Chase the Police Bot. 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 So I'm just giving him an example of the skills I want him to do, and he just sits and watches me do it. I don't expect him to do anything. He just thinks I'm taking my time to figure it out myself. Um, Coming at it from that approach is also helpful because you're coming at it from a place of curiosity, like you are problem solving, trying to figure out what sounds are in that word as well, and it's less scary for them. It's less stressful than if you say, okay, what sounds do you hear in that word? So always giving them a model. I'll tell you what happened. I would pick out a character like Chase and I would say, what's the first sound in Chase? And he would go, Chase. And I'd say, yeah, it's ch. And then I say, what's the first sound in Transformers? And again, he would think about it. And sometimes they don't get it right. But so more of the same thing. Take the time when you're reading books to talk about the sounds and letters that are coming up. Approach it from a place of curiosity and like you're trying to figure it out. So in this video, I say, what does crocodile start with? And he goes, I don't know what he says, but the wrong letter. And I say, I didn't hear that letter. Let me try it. Crocodile. Oh no, I heard that sound at the beginning. And then you can hear him saying he's going, so he's trying to figure it out himself and come to that same place that I did. So I'm not saying, no, that's not right. Try it again, do it again. I'm giving him the model. We're trying to figure it out together. It should be stress-free. It should be a positive experience. You're just talking about it together. And again, before I would ever quiz him and ask him, I would make sure that he has seen me model it enough times that he feels comfortable doing it. I really want to set him up for success in this because confidence is such a huge part of everything that we do. If they feel confident doing it, they're going to be a lot more likely to try and do their best. I'll just check the time. So I love I love spot books because they have opportunities like this. Like this is a page from the that I took, and I actually now do it with him. We blend it, we segment it. We use this as our beginning. Like I could add in another letter at the end, or we could turn dog into dot or whatever. Like I see this and it's so nicely broken up into different parts. It works on his phonics, it works on his phonemic awareness. So every time we get to that page, I do something with it. So I'm sure you have books as well that would be the same. So I'll just quickly show some examples of environmental print. And again, this is a critical skill that critical part of learning what how reading and writing works. So definitely take the time to point it out and let them be familiar. Like, oh, there's a stop sign again. Do you see it? Stop. That says stop. A store that you go to all the time. If you drive by it, say, oh, do you know what store? Do you see that sign? Do you know what store that is? Use your cereal boxes. Use anything that's basically the environmental print means print of everyday life. So use anything, any print that they will see. And all we want them to be able to do is recognize it. You don't need to break apart the sounds. You just want them to see the sign and know what it says. The last thing I have, and I had another video, but probably won't work either, but rhyming with our kids is another really great thing that we can do to build their phonemic awareness. It builds their ability to identify sounds and discriminate between sounds, and also builds on their fluency development, which is something that we are always working towards. And it helps them notice the sounds in the words and how we can manipulate those sounds to get the words that we want. So a really great song that you can sing with your child is Apples and Bananas, where you change the vowel each verse. So it starts off, I like to eat apples and bananas. And then it moves on to, I like to oat, opals and bananas. So all the verbs, oh, sorry, all the vowels change. And it's just really fun. And it's kind of just building this skill. That's not rhyming, but that is a great song to do. My advice with rhyming is to keep it really light and fun. Use engaging songs and books. We don't necessarily want to be doing this in a very serious way, like worksheets or anything like that. We want it to be just a fun thing that they can think about. So in the car would be perfect. The video that I have here is my son. Since he was little, I've read him this book called Down by the Bay. And it all just rhymes. So it'd be like down by the bay where the watermelons grow, back to my home, I dare not go. For if I do, my mother would say, have you ever seen a bear brushing his hair down by the bay? So what my son loves to do is to think of silly rhymes. So this video is him saying, have you ever seen a bapple eating a schmapple? So they're non-words. And then he laughs his head off. Non-words are great because they show that the child actually knows how to make a rhyme. This isn't memorized. They haven't memorized bear brushing his hair. They know why bear goes with hair, and they're able to come up with one on their own. So if they are making a non-word, we don't want to say, no, that's not a word. Let's try again. That's great if they're able to do that. And then in the video, he actually says after he does it, he goes, that's a funny one, isn't it? That's funny. So it's just trying to make this enjoyable for them, not stressful. If they're not getting it, don't worry, model it, move on, try again the next day. Like there's no this is kind of a long process and there's no rush. We have every day to work on it just a tiny bit more. Um, That's the end. I just wanted to quickly say this is a picture of the Little Red Reading House in Calgary. I don't, if any of you have not been, it's a really great place to take your preschooler. It's a house that has been completely converted into this magical place. Every room has a different theme. It has all these like cozy nooks and things for kids to climb into with a book. It's just so fun and it makes the idea of reading fun. And then every child gets to take a book home with them. So that is also great. And on the next slide, I have these resources. So these are the milestones that I talked about from the CDC and from Stanford. This is the Bookshare Time website. So I would definitely suggest if you even you take your child's IPP, read through what their goals are, take those keywords and put it into this website. And then next time you go to the library or a bookstore, you can see if they have any of those titles and try that with your child. So it's a good way to work on their goals. And then I've just written some places to visit in Calgary that will help support early literacy development and make reading fun and exciting. I love taking my son to Fairs Fair bookstore because because it's a used bookstore, so all the books are like I don't know, $5, $3, $6. So my son can pick whatever book he wants and I'll get it for him. And that's the book that we end up reading over and over and over again because he's so motivated by it. The library is a great resource. The Little Red Reading House, as I said, is also great. And I'll just put this slide back up. So if you do have any questions or comments or want to talk through anything, I'd be happy to hear from you. My email address is written here and also on the first slide.